am grateful to be able to be with you today, to celebrate and acknowledge and remember Thich Nhat Hanh. Though this talk is going to be a little bit longer than our usual Dharma talks, it includes a lot of quotes of Thich Nhat Hanh's, and it was really important for me to write in order to come to terms with his passing and to integrate who he was to me. So please just enjoy your breathing as we sit together for this very special Monday mindfulness meditation. I want to begin by offering you a quote of Thay's that he gave for the 2015 Paris Climate Talks. We live in a time of collective awakening. One of the signs that we are beginning to wake up is our ability to come together as a species to face the global challenge of climate change. It is only by continuing and deepening this process of awakening that we will be able to save the planet and make a future possible for our children and their children. Awakening is the foundation of every change. As human beings, we are a living, breathing manifestation of this beautiful and generous planet. When we are able to see this, we transform our relationship to the earth. We begin to walk differently on our beautiful planet. We start to care for her differently. We fall completely in love with the earth. When we recognize the beauty, the fragility, and the preciousness of the earth, we feel connected to her, and love is born in our hearts. When you love someone, you want to take care of that person as you would take care of yourself. That is the relationship each of us can have with the earth. And the other thing I wanted to start off with today is a poem called Bhumi Sparsha that really got my attention as we were going through these days of releasing Thay. It's a poem he wrote. I'm not sure when he wrote it, but it has a special meaning to me. Bhumi Sparsha means touching the earth. It's the earth witness mudra or hand gesture that the Buddha used when he summoned the earth goddess Prithvi at the time of his awakening. Prithvi is a Sanskrit name of the earth goddess. She has another name, which is Vasundhara, which means the bearer of treasure. And those of you who know me know that I love this very much. Touching the earth was Siddhartha's response to the attack by Mara that occurred when he was in the process of awakening. Mara is the demon who assaulted him beneath the Bodhi tree in an attempt to prevent him from attaining enlightenment. So he touched the earth to call on the earth to witness his awakening. The earth goddess emerged to support and bear witness to his attainment of enlightenment. And it is in this posture of Bhumi Sparsha that Shakyamuni overcame all those obstructions that Mara threw at him to prevent his awakening. The mudra is formed when all 5 fingers of the right hand extend down to touch the ground. Thay wrote in his book, Love Letter to the Earth, Shakyamuni Buddha was a child of you, Mother Earth, who attained full awakening at the foot of the Bodhi tree. After his long journey of seeking, he realized that the earth is our true and only home, and that heaven, the whole cosmos, and the ultimate dimension can be touched right here with you. This is the poem. Death comes with his impressive scythe and says, "You should be afraid of me." I look up and ask, "Why should I be afraid of you?" "Because I will make you dead. I will make you non-existent." "How can you make me non-existent?" Death does not answer. He swings his impressive scythe. I say, "I come and I go. Then I come again and I go again. I always come back. You can neither make me exist nor non-exist." "How do you know that you will come again?" Death asks. "I know because I have done that countless times," I say. "How do I know that you are telling the truth? Who can be the witness?" Death frowns. I touch the earth and say, "Earth is my witness. She is my mother." Suddenly death hears the music. Suddenly death hears the birds singing from all directions. Suddenly death sees the trees blossoming. Earth makes herself apparent to death and smiles lovingly to him. Death melts in the loving gaze of earth. Oh, my beloved, touch earth every time you get scared. Touch her deeply and your sorrow will melt away. Touch her deeply and you will touch the deathless. When Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh died, I was reminded of his words. "The day my mother died, I wrote in my journal, a serious misfortune of my life has arrived." It's a beautiful story. I won't go into the whole thing, but I'll post it for you. Fittingly, Thay died at the hour of 0000 in Vietnam on 1/22/22. I was stopped in my tracks, grief-stricken and stunned, but also filled with the deepest gratitude for the 37 years he guided my life. Seeing him lying on his deathbed, watching him being carried to his casket as throngs of devoted followers bowed to the ground to touch the earth in his honor. He was laid inside the wooden box covered with sandalwood, the lid closed over his body. A stunning arrangement of chrysanthemums, his favorite flower, was placed on top and all around. I wept at the inexpressible beauty. For days, tears fell from my eyes as everything else came to a stop, and I, along with thousands of his disciples, all around the world, beheld the exquisite details of each day's unfolding. His death, a breathtaking reflection of the realization of his life. That he, and all the international sanghas quickened to realize his teaching, repeated over and over, that he is not gone, that he continues in each of us, in each breath and every step, that the next Buddha will be a sangha, and that a collective awakening is upon us. And so we touch the earth. One day later, I look up at the bright blue sky and I know he is there. He has not become a cloud like he said so often. As today there are no clouds, yet the cloud is there. His practice and teachings gave us the understanding of that word he coined, interbeing. From the book Understanding Our Mind, We think that when we arrive at a certain point, we die, but that is not the way it is. We are already present in all corners of the universe. What is it that dies? The dead body is just our insignificant remains. We are already in all corners of the universe. We are present in our children, students, friends, readers, all the people we have made happy and all the people we have made suffer. We are in a cycle of birth and death in every instant. To say that it is only when we arrive at a certain point that we die and begin to enter the cycle of rebirth is oversimplified. Everything possesses the nature of interbeing within itself. The cycle of birth and death is achieved in every moment. Self and non-self are not two distinctive entities. They are not separate. Once we have touched deeply the nature of interbeing, we will not separate self and non-self. All 8 consciousnesses are all the seeds and all the mental formations together with their objects, including our bodies, are evolving in the ocean of birth and death. Always evolving, always flowing, collective or individual, store consciousness is like a river. Our sense consciousnesses are also like rivers. Birth and death are happening in each of these rivers, and these rivers are traversing the cycle of rebirth in every instant. When we understand this, and our understanding expresses itself in our life, we reach the state of non-fear. If we see it only as a theory, it will not bring us to a state of fearlessness. The state of non-fear is the state of no birth and no death, of not many and not one. Without this living insight, we will remain in fear. Birth and death are taking place every moment. We are floating in the ocean of birth and death right now. When we are able to see the cycle clearly with our insight and wisdom, we no longer need to be afraid of it. We will know how to enjoy floating on the ocean of birth and death. After a week of lying in state in his home temple, Thay's casket was carried in a procession through the streets of Hue to be placed in the crematorium on the hill overlooking the city. The fire was lit, and gently, mindfully, over many hours, his monks fed the fire underneath a cascade of white lotuses, hanging like a curtain around the burning ground. Sister Chang Kong sang her with her angelic voice. The land where he was cremated is to become now a park where one can walk slowly in mindfulness and breathe deeply in and out with each step. Thay lived his life as a practice of peace, returning over and over to the breath of life, to calm the violent storms inside of himself and all around him. He lived through war, through terrible tragedies and injustices. And while some might say he escaped into his smile, he was only human, and that smile saved him, as it has so many of us who now practice smiling too. Zen teacher Alan Senaki, who was the former director of the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, writes, Thich Nhat Hanh always wore the simple brown robes of a monk. He walked and spoke mindfully as a Zen teacher, poet, and bridge between the world's faiths. But the strength of steel lay just below that placid surface. It made him a kind of Buddhist revolutionary. I recall Zen teacher Richard Baker's description of Thich Nhat Hanh as, quote, a cross between a cloud, a snail, and a piece of heavy machinery, a true religious presence. Now at the age of 95, he has left this earthly plane and his frail body, but his wisdom and influence are strong, completely alive and essential. Thay brought a nonviolent movement to the Buddhist monasteries and created the School of Youth for Social Service, a cohort of Buddhist peace workers working in rural villages of Vietnam during the war. So many of our villages were being bombed, Thich Nhat Hanh said. Along with my monastic brothers and sisters, I had to decide what to do. Should we continue to practice in our monasteries, or should we leave the meditation halls in order to help the people who were suffering under the bombs? After careful reflection, we decided to do both, to go out and help people and do so in mindfulness. We called it engaged Buddhism. Mindfulness must be engaged. Once there is seeing, there must be acting. Otherwise, what is the use of seeing? We must be aware of the real problems of the world. Then, with mindfulness, we will know what to do and what not to do to be of help. Thich Nhat Hanh brought a balm for our afflictions. His teachings were a Dharma rain that nourished life. He was as engaged in life as one can be, and now can be found in every mindful breath we breathe. Prolific in his simple teachings that spoke directly to children and the child in all of us, and at the same time an astounding scholar whose translations and commentaries illuminated the Dharma with deepest consideration, knowledge, and fresh eyes. Fluent in Chinese, French, English, and Vietnamese, he could read, write, and speak as a true adept. I began reading Thich Nhat Hanh's books in the 1980s, starting with The Miracle of Mindfulness. And then when Being Peace was published, I helped finance its publication, the first book from Parallax Press. Again, from Alan Senaki, he says, after Being Peace, the stream of published words by Thay became a wide river with brilliant commentaries on classic Theravada and Mahayana sutras, radical reinterpretations of the Bodhisattva precepts, and Buddhist social commentary on our troubled modern world. To have been close to Thay during this era of his creative flowering before he was widely known was the greatest honor. Thich Nhat Hanh's understanding was clear and direct, his view as vast as the entire cosmos. And he loved the earth like no other Buddhist master has ever expressed. You carry Mother Earth within you, he said. She is not outside of you. Mother Earth is not just your environment. In the insight of interbeing, it is possible to have real communication with the earth, which is the highest form of prayer. Surely, Thich Nhat Hanh was a true mystic. He recognized Jesus and Buddha as brothers. He also encouraged us to go back to our root traditions and find the spirit of the Dharma in our own languages and lineages. When I was struggling to reconcile my love for Thai Zen with my love for the Vajrayana of Tibetan Buddhism, I felt I should choose. He told me, this is the open way Sangha. I first heard Thay speak at the Berkeley Community Theater in the early 1980s. Everything changed. I had proposed to Joan Halifax, then founder of the Ojai Foundation, my idea to do a council on peaceful cultures. Joan met Thay in France and called me to say, he is peace. She suggested he open the retreat. Soon after that, he came to the US, and for the second time since the 1980s, when he taught at Columbia and Princeton and spoke out against the war. At Ojai, he led us in walking meditation across those golden fields and invited us to imagine a lotus blooming under our feet. I walked as tenderly as if I was carrying a sleeping infant in my arms. The universal Dharma door is already open. The sound of the rising tide is clear, and the miracle occurs. A beautiful child is born in the heart of a lotus. A single drop of this compassionate nectar is enough to bring back the streams to mountains and to rivers. Namo Avalokiteshvaraya. When I heard the 14 precepts for the first time during the retreat, I cried. They were shorter and simpler then. Now the precepts are called mindfulness trainings. Thay gave me a handheld bell and told me to start a sangha. Of course, I did what he asked, and slowly I began to lead meditations and eventually find my voice as a Dharma teacher, but it took many years. After the Peaceful Cultures Council, I went to Asia for the first time, traveling through Buddhist countries looking for my teacher, not yet realizing I'd already found him. I came back via France and went to Plum Village. It was 1985, and he invited me to join the Order of Interbeing in a ceremony that included Joan Halifax, who was also there, and Annabelle Laity, who later became a nun and is a great scholar. I was given the name True Source. In those days, there were very few people around Thay, and we were able to spend so much intimate time visiting with him, drinking tea and talking. I told Thay I had not been ready to leave Asia and return to the West. His response was, Asia is here. Here is Asia. And then he told me to organize a retreat for artists at the Ojai Foundation, focusing on what is the face of American Buddhism. He put me to work and gave me a purpose, and again, my life changed. That retreat was a seminal experience for so many of us, writers, painters, sculptors, musicians, dancers, from all the many lineages and Dharma streams who were invited to attend. Thay inspired so much creativity and opened a huge Dharma door for us all to walk through. The folk singer Betsy Rose was there and put many of his poems to music. The one called I Hold My Face in My Two Hands is particularly beautiful. I would play it for you now, but it will take too much time, and I'll post it in the mandala. We organized a second retreat for artists 2 years later, and soon Thay would go on to offer retreats for environmentalists, teachers, psychotherapists, veterans, and even members of Congress. During that second artist retreat, I was in the process of separating from my first husband and in a lot of pain. So I went to Thay to ask for his advice. He told me I should go to Africa and help people less fortunate than myself. At the time, I could not imagine doing such a thing, but years later, I did go to Africa with an earth treasure vase. And I worked with the people of Liberia who had suffered from this terrible civil war. And Thay was right. Going to Africa was another life-changing event that totally transformed my life and my attachment to a sense of self, and brought a new understanding of engaged Buddhism. I spent a lot of time at Plum Village during the summers in the early 1990s. Thay gave in-depth teachings on various sutras. And it was during this time that for the first time, he gently proclaimed, the next Buddha will be a Sangha. There was a hushed sigh that passed through all of us as we attempted to understand those prophetic words. Thay had been in exile from Vietnam since the 60s. And during this same time, he proposed that Sister Annabelle, Joan Halifax, and I go to Vietnam together, his first Western students to do so. My new partner, Hugh, accompanied me. It was 1992, and we still had to be very careful as Thay was a persona non grata. But Hugh videoed all of our many encounters as we travel to all the places Thay asked us to go, seeing all the people he loved and visiting the sacred sites of his lineage. He gave us his handwritten manuscript of the book Transformation and Healing to deliver to his home temple in Huy, along with a picture of him as a 16-year-old novice. At Tu Hu Temple, they had built a pagoda for Thay, where we brought these things to live. His old colleagues from the School for Youth for Social Service and the monks and nuns of the temple gathered there with us. They brought tea to share, and we sat on the floor of the small one-room pagoda. They sang songs, recited poetry, and told stories of times with Thay, exactly like we did so often on retreats with Thich Nhat Hanh during our afternoon tea meditations. In the early 2000s, Thay finally went back to Vietnam, accompanied by hundreds of his lay and monastic community. And a few years ago, he returned for good to die there. That small light blue pagoda had expanded into a large home for him to live out his days on the sacred ground of Tu Hu Temple in Huy. Hugh and I went to Plum Village after that pilgrimage to Vietnam and brought Thay the video we managed to smuggle out of the country. Thay and Sister Chang Kong loved Hugh. And the next year, on May 1st, he married us in the Upper Hamlet in Plum Village. Then in 1994, I was informed Thay wanted to give me his transmission and to become a Dharmacharya, Dharma teacher in his lineage. I was told to contemplate this opportunity and let him know if I would accept. I went into retreat in the High Hermitage at the Lama Foundation in northern New Mexico. And what came clear to me in the midst of the thunder snow that fell was that I was not ready. So I wrote to him to say no, thank you. But the response that I got in the form of a handwritten fax from Thay was, it is the teacher's responsibility to give the transmission, and it is the student's responsibility to accept it. Love and trust, Thay. So at 6 a.m. in the Lower Hamlet in early August of 1994, I was the first of 20 to receive Dharma transmission from Thich Nhat Hanh in the lamp transmission ceremony. When I went to Africa in 2009 with a treasure vase, it had been many years since I had practiced directly with Thay. Some of us who had been close to him in those early days witnessed a kind of shadow creeping into the system in ways that we didn't want to be part of. So for a decade, I turned my attention to my Vajrayana practices. But when I went to Liberia, I could only think of Thay and how well his teachings would be received there, how healing the practice of mindfulness would be for those wounded by war. This led me to introduce 4 key peace builders to Thay and Sister Chang Kong and begin to teach the practice of mindfulness to them myself. Christian Bethelson, a former general in the army and later the rebel forces, was invited to live at Plum Village for the better part of 3 years. His colleagues Harper, Carmen, and Annie Nushin visited Plum Village for retreats. I was really moved to discover how the Sangha had matured during the years that I had been gone. And I was so moved to be able to go back, reconnect my early Dharma life again. So the Liberians went to Plum Village, and I taught them, and they taught mindfulness practice themselves once they had learned under the peace huts that we built in Liberia, and on a weekly national radio program called Conversations Under the Peace Huts. Bethelson, who called himself the Black Monk of Africa, took the 5 precepts or mindfulness trainings with me in New Mexico, and then joined the Order of Interbeing in Plum Village in 2017. Bethelson was lucky to meet Thay before his stroke. His teachings, Thay's teachings, catalyzed an incredibly powerful transformation for Bethelson, which is still going on. And thanks to Sister Chang Kong, the Plum Village community offered a great deal of financial support for their peace-building work in Liberia and for the education of their children, which continues to this day. Thich Nhat Hanh and Chara Rinpoche, of course, gave me my life, gave me my purpose, put me on the path I had been looking for. Walking meditation is my core practice. Breathing with mindfulness is the Dharma door I come back to when I'm most distracted. To return to the present moment, there is no better medicine. And without this simple practice, I would be completely lost inside of the Technicolor Vajrayana. It's taken a lifetime, but I have learned to weave these Dharma paths together. I've carried a bell of mindfulness on every Earth Treasure Face pilgrimage the world around. I've invited the bell on every continent and breathed the air that ripples with the sound of the bell on mountaintops, sources of rivers, caves, and inner cities. It always brings me back to my true self, true source. Once I dreamed of discovering an enormous bell in the depths of a deep, dark forest. I bravely invited it to sound, and when I did, it was like I had claimed my true place in the family of things. Another time, Hugh and I took a few days away from Plum Village to visit the Tibetan Nyingma Dharma Center in Dordogne, and stopped at a roadside restaurant where we sat outside under the trees. Near our table was a little spring that bubbled up from the ground. The restaurant was called La Source, bringing new understanding to the meaning of my Dharma name. Thay tells a story of being a small child on an outing to the woods with his classmates. They had heard of a hermit who lived high up on the mountain, so Thay wandered off to find him. He came to a well and gazed into the clear water, the most delicious water he had ever tasted. He fell asleep by the wellspring, and when he awoke, it was as if he were reborn. That was when the seed of becoming a monk was planted in him. From his book, No Death, No Fear, this body is not me. I am not limited by this body. I am life without boundaries. I have never been born, and I have never died. Look at the ocean and the sky filled with stars, manifestations from my wondrous true mind. Since before time, I have been free. Birth and death are only doors through which we pass, sacred thresholds on our journey. Birth and death are a game of hide and seek. So laugh with me, hold my hand, let us say goodbye. Say goodbye to meet again soon. We meet today, we will meet again tomorrow. We will meet at the true source every moment. We will meet each other in all forms of life. I know there's still so much to learn from Thay as I find my way to the true source, where he can be found now. The last memory I will share for now was when Thay taught the Avatamsaka Sutra at a retreat center tucked into the hills near Santa Cruz, California. Hugh was with me, and together we listened to Thay's Dharma talks, illuminating that famous Avatamsaka Sutra, where page-long sentences describe Buddha fields and realms of light vaster than eternity, as if one was looking into a prism and seeing reflected there innumerable goddesses presenting myriad offerings, lion thrones supporting Buddhas in every direction, lotuses blossoming, and countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas radiating light into the worlds upon worlds beyond space and time. We were bathed in such unimaginable beauty and sensed how rare it was for this simple monk in brown robes to be describing these realms and invite us to enter the ultimate dimension with him. Yet there we were, transported. That simple monk of engaged Buddhism smiled and walked among us, slowly breathing. And it was then that I knew I was in the presence of a living Buddha. And our poem in closing. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Look deeply. I arrive in every second to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with wings still fragile, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the water. And I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear pond, and I'm also I am also the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. Practicing the way of awareness gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the path. Thank you, everybody.